Yo, I'm so excited to be here. My name is Hassan, as they mentioned. I'm a politics reporter at the New York Times, and I am on the board of advisors of the Institute of Politics. And I'm super excited for us to be here with Hasan and to lead this conversation today. I think my questions are really going to go in a little bit of an arc to learn more about kind of where your career, how you found yourself here, and then get to some political stuff more towards the end. I think we broadly know your path, going from Young Turks to one of the biggest Twitch streamers in the country. But what is the origin of your interest in politics? And what was the moment where you decided to break off of the Young Turks and go off on yourself?
I was always interested in politics because I grew up in Turkey. And it's, you kind of get thrown into the realm of politics in Turkey because it's way more impactful, way more consequential than the way that a lot of Americans view it. And I grew up in the Erdogan regime taking power as well. And I saw a lot of that social conservatism and the immediate ways that it changed my life. I was a big fan of political cartoons. And I remember these political cartoonists that I used to read were getting sued by the Erdogan administration, which is not so dissimilar when you think about what Donald Trump is doing right now. And there's definitely a direct analog there. But it was little things like that and life-changing and meaningful ways that always kept me interested in talking about politics and keeping up with the discourse from an early age. And then as far as like how I transitioned from the Young Turks to go out on my own, in 2019, I had a unique moment, let's say, on stream. I had a heated gaming moment. It was on Fox News, and Dan Crenshaw was crying on Laura Ingraham, and all of a sudden, the threats became way more prominent. And they started yelling at like other random people that worked at the Young Turks as well. And I didn't want that kind of unwarranted attention to go towards other people for things that I was saying and doing. So that was my first foray into wanting to go out on my own. And I went full time in 2020 and I started live streaming every day. And by the end of 2020, I had become fairly sizable content creator on the platform, one of the biggest content creators on Twitch.
You know, we hear a lot about how these new internet spaces are apolitical. A lot of your kind of colleagues in the Twitch space stay away from politics. I'm wondering what made you, I know it's kind of natural to your interest. Why do you think talking about politics works for you on the platform? Like, what are the ways that you have learned to kind of crack that space if others haven't?
Yeah, at first I wanted people to talk about politics because I thought like there were a lot of progressive people out there. I thought it was like good to show that progressive politics is not shameful, that people shouldn't be afraid of speaking their opinions on these matters. And then Asmongold became the largest political content creator on the platform, and some people know who that is, but he is a right-wing commentator now, the biggest right-wing commentator in North America actually. And now I'm like, maybe don't talk about politics. It's better if they stay apolitical. But for the most part, I think like the apolitical nature of this space is just a way to shelter your more reactionary tendencies in general. I think people say that they're apolitical or they say that they're operating off of common sense beliefs, but usually that just simply means you're right-wing and not open about it. At least in my experience.
Yeah, but obviously there's been a bigger discussion kind of since Democrats have not been in that space, and there's been some thought about how do they find themselves more naturally there. But I'll talk about that later actually. I want to ask more directly, do you consider the line between like entertainment and activism? Do you think of yourself as a journalist? Like, how do you actually see your role?
Yeah, I don't. I see myself as a political commentator. Like, depending on who I'm talking to, I'll explain it as like Rush Limbaugh without the brain rot. Literally and figuratively, because he had brain cancer. And
also said you don't have brain rot. I'm impressed.
He's dead. He can't. What was he gonna do?
We're focusing on that though.
So anyway, but like it's basically like AM radio, but for Zoomers. So that's the way I describe it to people. And I do find myself to be more of an entertainer than an activist. Even though I do engage in activism, I always stress that, I'm simply an entertainer and I'm trying to urge others to go out and organize as well, because like I'm just one person and I would be saying these things even if I had 30 people watching me. But when I have 30,000, 40,000 people watching me, that means there are 30,000 to 40,000 people that can go out and organize and then build a movement that way. So yeah, I see myself as a political commentator and not an activist, even though I do engage in that.
One of the things I think that folks have found, obviously your audience, testament to this room, skews younger, skews folks who are highly online. I wonder, and it's, is that false? But I guess I'm saying I think it's also captured an audience that legacy media has missed, right?
Yeah.
What do you think is working in terms of why people are coming to folks like you versus why places like even the New York Times are struggling to reach some of those people?
I mean, I think there is a personality aspect to it for sure, but I think the medium that I'm in is so interactive, and people are looking for that. There's a sense of community building that exists online, on Twitch and in live streaming in general, and that is not exactly replicable by traditional media outlets, and they're never going to be able to do that regardless. Like, it'd be really funny if Jake Tapper if Jake Tapper had like parasocial stands. That'd be weird.
I think he does.
Doubtful. But I think that's definitely one reason for why I have these audiences. I'm also at a place, like, I speak the language. I'm from a different generation, and I'm also not in the same traditional media orbit, so I wasn't put through the ringer to develop a certain way of speaking and develop an attitude that is like very DC media bubble oriented. And I think that is genuine, and people appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. To the point about the community, I found it really fascinating. Like, it's very obvious, kind of the power that like folks like you hold. I could add up every CNN hit I did of all last year. They did not derive enough interest or followers or conversation as doing one of those streams. But I also wonder if that creates a kind of feedback loop. Like, when I'm doing a story, I don't have to really think about audience or immediate kind of reaction. Do you feel kind of a pressure because you're in a kind of continuous relationship with the audience? I mean, do you worry about saying some stuff because the chat won't like it?
No. Trust me, there's going to be dudes on the microphone today that I'm going to be yelling at, most likely. It's normal. It's a normal part of the process. Like, some people, I think there are certainly people that are audience captured in that regard, but like, for me, I care. I'm way too stubborn and way too brutally honest and maybe a little autistic. So it's just like, I don't care if someone is disagreeing with me. Like, I will take a position that I believe to be true, and obviously I'll arrive at that position by analyzing the fact. And even if it's unpopular, my goal always is to educate people. And that's the thing. Like, I wouldn't necessarily say that my perspective, that is fairly closer to a more orthodox Marxist perspective, is all too common in American media. Most people have never encountered someone who is speaking about these things from the angle that I take. So I already assume that everyone that's listening in, that's tuning in for the first time, is not immediately on board with the way that I see the world. Mm-hmm. So I have no expectation that people are going to be in agreement with me. It's my job to make a convincing argument and to also instill some sense of class consciousness in people that are tuning in.
Mm-hmm. I want to stick on this question of kind of like community and how you kind of moderate that community. You mentioned to me when we were talking the other time just about the efforts you all go through in terms of chat moderation. And I found it really interesting because, those type of spaces has been home for bigotry, slurs, things like that. How much time do you have to spend curating that community and moderating?
I mean, it's an ongoing process. It's something that I always have to work on, because I have a lot of other places will safeguard their community. They'll have like paywall, like membership only access if you want to communicate. Some places will add like additional check. For me, I want to have discourse. I want to have back and forths with people. I want to be able to educate people if they have questions on certain things. So I have a 10-minute follower mode, which means if you follow me for 10 minutes on my Twitch, you can say anything you want in the chat. And surely some people abuse that. They'll come in and they'll try to antagonize or say heinous things. But in that process, like, I use that as an educational moment, and I also use every opportunity like that to basically say, like, these are the well-defined boundaries in this community, like what is permissible and what is not. And that's one way that we moderate the community.
Mm-hmm. To the point about the kind of audience capture, particularly around young people, so much of the discussion has been around young people's disillusion with the political process. I think you speak directly to that. I wanted to see, like, do you consider yourself trying to overcome that disillusion, or are you just kind of relating to it and kind of wallowing it? Or do you see that kind of education piece as you're trying to move people out of their disillusionment?
Oh, for sure. I think that disillusionment is a huge problem because everyone has a tendency to fall to the whims of nihilism. And I feel like that's really bad for political progress in general. It's really bad for political mobilization in general. And so one of the things that I try to instill in everyone in my audience is like, one, self-development for sure, to create some confidence in yourself, achieve short-term victories for yourself so you feel more confident and have a little bit of control over things that are in your life that you have control over. But overall, I think I try to push everyone towards political activism for that reason, organizing, community organizing or labor organizing with unions, because it's one way that I think people can immediately impact their material condition in a way that's meaningful, and that I think inspires them to keep pushing for more and more, and hopefully build a larger network that can resist against certain things that this admin is doing.
You become a voice for Democrats really asking the why they lost question since the election. I just wanted to start by posing that to you as we start talking about change in parties. Why do you think Kamala Harris lost?
Oh, where do I begin? I mean, I've talked about this so much at this point, but
just imagine.
I mean, Democrats are zealots. Like they are they're so married to the idea of maintaining institutional control, maintaining the infallibility of institutions, and third way neoliberalism, where they think that a little bit of market regulation, maybe with a lot more deregulation down the line, is how we're going to magically improve people's material conditions at a time when we have incredible wealth disparity and 600,000 people sleeping outside every night in the richest country on the planet, in the richest country throughout history. And I feel like people see these inequalities, and while mainstream media and many other resources that people rely on are constantly telling them, no, this is normal. Like everything that you see is actually normal. Like I think there is a great sense of discontent and anger. And if left unchanneled, you have right-wing reactionary movements that can take that anger, recognize it, and then move it to an unproductive place that benefits their political purposes, as the Trump administration so correctly did, by taking the anger and animosity that people felt and then saying, you're angry not because your boss is fucking you over. Can I curse here? Is that allowed? Okay.
It's too late for that.
Yeah. You're angry not because your boss is screwing you over, but you're angry because it trains people. You're angry because undocumented migrants exist on U.S. soil, and they're able to build on that anger, whereas the Democrats, I think, were so uninterested in recognizing that, where they thought like, oh, it's a vibe session, like, oh, people are not feeling the pain in their wallets, it's going to go away. Yeah. And no matter how many think pieces you write on that, like the average person is not that's not going to change the average person experiencing negative real wage growth for almost 2 years under the Biden administration.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where there was a lot of overlap in how in our work and what you were talking about is because, that kind of 2021, 2022 moment when Democrats were trying to talk people out of their concerns really sticks out in terms of the reasons why they lost. But I guess I'm just want to clarify, am I hearing that you think more Democrats lost more so than Donald Trump won? Because there's another argument you could say, which is that, he was affirmatively kind of shifting the electorate rather than it was the Democrats' failures, as said.
No, I think there's always a push and pull. And yes, for that reason, I think the Democrats were definitely responsible for their own defeat, for their own demise. And they were responsible not in the campaign cycle. They were responsible early on. I went back and looked at my earlier reporting in the month of February in 2021, where immigration was becoming a problem. We had that image of Customs and Border Patrol on a horseback, whipping Haitian migrants at the border in Texas. And I remember even back then saying, if they don't actually go along with the mandate that they had, with the mandate that Biden had on his first 100 days of immigration, where he was talking about building pathways for amnesty and all these things, if they don't actually fulfill those promises and they don't counter message against the Republicans on this issue, they're going to keep hammering this button over and over again. and the media is absolutely going to go along with it. And lo and behold, that's precisely what happened. 3 years after that, you had Biden on October 6th coming out and saying that they were unveiling this incredibly draconian, incredibly right-wing, white nativist, anti-immigrant agenda package that they said that a Oklahoma senator wrote, and it was basically Trump's 2020 immigration agenda repackaged and being sold to the American public as a Democratic bill. After 8 years of constantly yelling at Republicans for being racist, for wanting to build a stupid border wall, now they wanted to fund the border wall. That is at the heart of the Democratic Party's failure, that they don't actually showcase a vision for a better future, and they shy away from policies that will improve people's material conditions. And obviously part of that is because they're captured by the same corporate interests as the Republicans are. But Republicans and the social issues that they can hammer on, the culture war issues that they can hammer on, are way more appealing than the culture war issues that the Democrats try to engage in a defensive posture over, especially because they're not earnest in that defense either. They're no more earnest on defending trans people than like Target is when they roll out LGBTQ friendly baby onesies once a year. In the month of, is it July? I don't even know when Pride Month is. June. I'm never defeating the allegation.
Yeah, I'm like.
I say I'm an LGBT foe all the time, and there you go. But it's just, for them, it's hollow. It's not real. It's not a real battle that they want to fight. And they constantly find themselves in this defensive posture, and they allow the Republicans to dominate discourse. They allow Republicans to lead on issues that they can win.
Yeah, but I'm going to push there because isn't there also a public opinion problem here? Like the reason that Biden was moderating on immigration was not just because of Republicans, but because of a legitimate shift among public sentiment that Americans were growing more conservative on the issue. The reason they had, you see the Gavin Newsoms of the world kind of flipping their opinion on trans women in sports is partially because there is numbers that tell you that that's where the country is. Like, sometimes I hear leftists talk as if there's this like unrealized mass of leftists that just hasn't been activated. Is that true, or is that a matter of convincing a public?
It's a matter of convincing the public. It has nothing to do with like how woke everyone is secretly deep down inside and like activating their potential or whatever, and everything to do with the fact that you have to constantly engage in counter messaging, and you have to constantly engage in messaging, and also on top of that you have to have a unified agenda that touches every single person. And that's why class politics is so important. And I think that's the reason why now you see the Democrats actually leaning on the Bernie Sanders style of commentary, where they're trying to do a fake class first politics as well. But even Bernie himself is actually he's 800 years old, no disrespect, but even he finds himself like coming across as a little bit right wing on some of these issues as well. Yeah. But I'm of the belief that I want to talk about two things when it comes to immigration. Number one is there's always two different polls that people never actually react to when talking about immigration. Even at a time when you had the highest approval rating for Trump's mass deportation agenda, right? I mean, this is straight Hitlerian policy. Like mass deportation of 20 million people, that's insane. You're going to put them in concentration camps? What are we doing? Even at that point, when Americans were consistently asked mass immigration or mass amnesty, they still chose mass amnesty. But no one ever presents that second option as a viable solution to this problem. And that is at the heart of the issue from the way I see it, where if you don't present Americans with the other option, if you don't constantly counter message, if you don't actually do your very best to showcase the humanity of migrants and how much they contribute to these communities, then of course Republicans are going to constantly counter message and talk about some of the most heinous, some of the most violent things that have taken place and attribute that to migrants across the board, even though there's no evidence that shows that undocumented immigrants are responsible for a larger share of crime than natural-born U.S. citizens, and only evidence to show the exact opposite, that they're responsible for less crime per capita than natural-born U.S. citizens are. So Democrats never make that argument, and I think it's because they're afraid. I go back and forth. I sometimes think they're controlled opposition, and then other times I realize whenever I talk to a Democrat or a staffer, I'm like, oh, you're just stupid. Like, you just don't know. You just don't believe in yourself, and you're just posturing as a somewhat progressive figure on certain issues in an effort to win votes, but that's it. Like, it's not genuine.
You mentioned the kind of primacy of class politics, which obviously is a theme in your work. I remember when Bernie was making some of these arguments in the 2016 and 2020 race. And I also remember when he ran into big problems in places like South Carolina and others where that argument wasn't really landing. How much does the left need to win over working class folks of color who haven't really come to them in the same type of way? And what is the balance between recognizing class politics and the importance of identity politics and representation to some folks?
Yeah. You and I actually had this conversation on my stream where we were talking about like the Democrat machine and how strong it is. I also had another conversation similar to this with my friend FD Signifier, shouts out, he's a wonderful YouTuber, about how like the black aunties are the backbone of the Democratic Party, right? Like, and they are...
And the world, basically.
Yeah, yes, exactly, for sure. And what I was interested in understanding is like, I think a lot of people of color understand that it's about survival, and it's about the demon that you know as opposed to the demon that you don't. And in most circumstances, they make this decision knowing full well that like the people that they're voting for are not, I mean, they're maybe marginally less racist than the other side that's like overtly racist, right? And I think that because there's so much strategic voting that takes place in that regard, I think as long as you can make it out of the primary structure, like a figure, no matter how populist they are, no matter how like left-leaning they are, no matter how predisposed with class politics they are, will be able to captivate the attention of like the base of the Democratic Party. Like people that find themselves in a position where they're voting for Joe Biden, whether because they love Joe Biden or because they think that he's a safer bet, are definitely still going to vote for whoever the Democrat is. And I think that's the base of support that we can bring over, rather than try to craft a message specifically for that base of support.
Got it. You mentioned the scenes in first Trump administration, specifically I remember the whip and the immigration moment. I think about that time too because there was so much public pushback on some of those things. I remember folks going to the airports when the Muslim ban dropped and things.
Yeah.
Do you still see that same level of engagement? I imagine like you're on the pulse of the resistance maybe. Like why aren't people in the streets?
That's actually a really great question. I think that there's two problems. One is the disillusionment that people feel because I think in the aftermath of the Black Lives Matter protests that took place in 2020, where a lot of people in this room did all of the right things. Like you did it by the book. You went out, you protested in the streets, you yelled at your congresspersons, you tweeted, okay? You did it all. And then when the election came around, you went out and you voted. You held your nose and you voted for Joe Biden, even though he was very visibly deteriorating. And it didn't matter because it was like, it's better than Trump, right? And then nothing came of that. And I feel like that creates a lot of disillusionment amongst young people and just virtually any American that participated in this process that looked at that and went, well, we saw no reforms whatsoever on policing. And as a matter of fact, most of the Democrats were predisposed with like positioning themselves as against these organic movements that were born out of Black Lives Matter. And surely there was people going maybe a little too far in terms of maybe not putting their least radical positions out there. But overall, I think that created a lot of nihilism that we haven't really examined thoroughly. So that's one reason why I don't think a lot of people are even protesting Trump to the same degree as they were last time around. Because last time around, he was also seen as an aberration. Like, this is not us, when, this definitely was us. Like, Trump is a perfect beacon of American stupidity. And
it always bothered me when people say, like, this is not, I'm like, what is democracy otherwise? This is us.
No, that was definitely us. And it still is us. But I think in terms of the immigration, like the conversation definitely shifted to the right due to very little interest from the Democrats in terms of counter messaging. And they got completely captive to white nativist sentiment. And if you recall, you and I had another conversation when you brought up your follow-up on the Run Up podcast, where you talked to these people and you were like, what are you worried about right now? And if you told me that immigration was not at the forefront of anyone's mind, pretty much. And I told you then, and it started to happen already, that eventually it will, because people are going to start developing too much resentment towards this administration's unjustifiable immigrant detention policies. And since we had that conversation, he's underwater even on that issue as well. And the reason why that happened is because they made a major mistake with Kilmar Abrego Garcia. They detained and refused to do due process for virtually all of these migrants that they had captured and sent to CCOT. And yet, an immigration attorney of the Trump administration accidentally revealed that they had made a mistake. And when that happened, the media seized on that. They started covering it. And then it became a major issue of consequence. I mean, a major issue that people were demanding some sort of restitution for. And the Trump administration being hard-headed, refused. And it led to Chris Van Hollen actually going down to El Salvador to get proof of life for this person. And in that process, I think a lot more Americans started realizing what was truly happening. Because they're busy. Everyone is busy. Mm-hmm. They're focusing on their own lives. They've completely checked out of politics. But like when an issue becomes noteworthy enough that like a lot of outlets are covering it, Americans still do have a collective conscience where they go, okay, that's really messed up. And that momentum is only going to build from this point on, because it's not like the Trump administration is going to back away from doing these unjustifiable detention policies, and it's only going to escalate further, and then you'll start seeing more protests in the streets.
Mm-hmm. One more question on Democrats before we move on. There's another argument I've heard some folks say that like it wasn't a matter of message, it was just that they weren't in the right places, right? Like they actually bring those to people. That Democrats had kind of lost culture more than it is a need for a policy shift. I know your team, they need to change their policies, but if we're just focusing on kind of where they deliver their message, how do they get back into culture?
They should just go on Call Her Daddy. That was good. I mean, no disrespect to Call Her Daddy, but you know, it's just I don't think you can.
I mean, to that point, I remember that interview as
Trump.
like a moment when Democrats were bringing their same message just to a new place, right?
Yeah.
That seems like part of the problem.
Yeah, but if the message is shit, it's not going to resonate with people. Like Kamala Harris's brilliant campaign message was like $50,000 in tax breaks for small businesses. Like she kept saying like, I am a small business. I love small businesses. It was like, that doesn't resonate with people that are having a hard time struggling to pay their bills. You know what I mean?
You really think people vote on policy first?
I think people vote on an earnest communicator that can promise them a better life. And that is not what the Democrats do in general. They never come across as earnest. They come across as entitled, smug, elitist. And also, two, the policies are far too technocratic in their approach. Like, look at Elizabeth Warren versus Bernie Sanders as an example. Elizabeth Warren and she's done fantastic work with like Lena Khan, for example, and on the back end, on the policy side, like CFPB is brilliant, it's fantastic. But Elizabeth Warren as a campaigner, unfortunately, is a freaking nerd. It's just not, that's gonna resonate well with like people on Twitter. That's gonna resonate well with like college educated people. But you're not making an impact with like regular Americans. You're not, if your messaging discipline revolves around this technocratic approach, then it's not gonna work. Sometimes you have to engage in this kind of populist sentiment in the way that Bernie did, which is why I think he saw a lot more success.
We have 10 minutes before audience questions, so y'all keep that in mind. And I think we're gonna start putting some of the mics out. You all can start lining up as you have them. You mentioned some of your previous controversies. I wanna ask, oh wow, we're getting mass movement. Well, let's chill out. Let's walk, y'all.
I told you I'm gonna yell.
Let's calm down, friends. Okay, I want to ask directly about some of the controversies you referenced.
Hit me.
And, you know, I would love an earnest response here. I mean, you mentioned some of the back and forth. There was a statement from the Chicago Jewish Alliance I'm going to read to you and would love for you to respond to. Piker has a history of making inflammatory statements, including America deserves a remark that trivializes national tragedy, referring to Israelis. Don't laugh. Sorry. I'm serious. Stating it doesn't matter if it happened on October 7th. It doesn't change the dynamic for me. Such statements have prompted concern for public officials, and they mentioned some other folks. By inviting Piker to speak, the University of Chicago risk endorsing a narrative that endorses views as harmful and divisive. I'm posing this to you partially because I want a direct response, but also I think it's important for folks to hear a real answer to this stuff. We're not going to run from these things. We're going to talk about them directly.
Yeah.
I want you to, what do you, like, just respond.
Okay. The fact that like people still use that quote when I say like it doesn't matter what happened on October 7th, that doesn't change the dynamic for me, is like so revealing, because Israel is committing a genocide. And my position on this is clear, that like whatever happened on October 7th, the atrocities that took place on October 7th does not justify genocide. And it's really, thank you. Well, I mean, this isn't a brave position, I don't think. Like, and that's what's so alarming, that like people will say that all the time. Like, people will put that in like the Free Press or Daily Mail, or whenever there's like a hit piece written from these smear rags in general. It's always come across very confusing to me.
But something like America Deserves is obviously at least inflammatory.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like, do you ever think about the impact of those words? And do you have to, I know it's an informal forum, you're kind of rolling with it live. Like, how do you wrestle with, something that could be offhand, but actually be more meaningful? Actually be more hurtful.
Yeah, I mean, I think that America Deserves in general was probably one of my most vindicated takes. Maybe I'm delusional about it, but in terms of describing the concept of blowback, a lot of people were unaware of the machinations behind the scenes from Operation Cyclone, or even before that, even prior to that, in terms of like arming and radicalizing the Mujahideen and using them in the Afghan Civil War against the USSR, and what that turned into. That is a common thread in American foreign policy, is that people that we give arms to and offer a lot of training and support to inevitably turn on us for understandable reasons. So I don't shy, like, even if I say something that is hyperbolic in that moment, because I get passionate sometimes and I have what people call a heated gaming moment, it's ultimately my message is clear. And does that get in the way of me reaching a broader audience? Certainly. I understand that, but it happens. Mm-hmm. It happens sometimes.
So I hear you more have made peace with it than think it's a thing that you're gonna. I'm saying a heated gaming moment for a lot of folks is just a heated gaming moment. Yeah. For you, it's a big audience. Yeah. So I'm saying, have you changed the way you think about those?
For sure. Especially because like I don't really appreciate all the doxing that comes afterwards and the swatting that comes afterwards, but it's definitely something that gets away in the message that I'm trying to present. And so for that reason, I do try to moderate every now and then, or try to regulate my temperature every now and then when I find myself saying something that might easily be misconstrued or is like explosive, right? But overall, mistakes still happen. I'm a human being. I own up to it, and that was one of those moments.
Cool. Last question I have, and then we'll go to the audience questions. So much of your life is lived publicly. I find it kind of shocking. Like just how much is just, how much just living out there you do. And how folks, really come to understand you, have a relationship with you because of that. I wanted to ask, what's something we don't know? What's a misunderstanding about you? What's something you've kept to yourself? And how have you regulated that?
Ooh, that's interesting. That's not a question that I thought I'd be answering. I mean, everything is online except for, I guess, like personal relationships that I have. I try to keep private to the best of my ability because I don't want to invite, unwelcome attention to other people because, I can deal with it, but not everyone is like equipped or should be equipped to deal with that sort of stuff. In terms of like something about me that people don't know, I don't know. I'm drawing a blank. I would say that I've never had a position where I think people should not have nice things. That's like the number one thing that people always be like, oh, rich socialist, what a hypocrite. But it's like, no, I want everyone to be able to have like enough disposable income so they can buy stupid shit. So that's, I guess, like one of the most common misconceptions. But I think people in this audience probably already knew my position on this because, you guys probably tune in every now and then.
You're pro nice stuff.
Yeah, I think, and stupid shit too. Like not just nice stuff, like things that make you feel good.
Okay, I'm gonna ask you this question again in a little bit. I want you to think of a better answer.
Okay.